Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for choosing to watch my video, and if you would subscribe it, like it, all that stuff, that'd be great. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I hope it gives you the information you need and is helpful to you. Take care. Timing belt water pump replacement, Kia Optima V6 overview. Got a 17mm wrench on the tensioner. I'm going to push it counterclockwise to loosen the belt. I'm take the belt off, then I'll probably take this hose off and cap it for the power steering fluid. Then probably support the engine with a jack underneath it and take this mount off. 10mm bolt for the ground wire, probably 17mm nuts and bolts. And we'll be taking that off then as well. Got it out. Of course, when the mount's out of the way, it'll be much easier to take the belt out, but you can get it out just by doing that. Pull these sensor connectors out. They just have little slots, probably can slide out of here. Push this metal bracket down to release it. Let's do that for both of those. We can get those out of the way. So there's a 10mm bolt for the bracket. You could also maybe leave it, and we'll disconnect it there, and then trying to do stuff up above here. So you got this out here, got our jack underneath there, but I don't think the engine really moves much. Let's lower it down some. Oh, it goes on quite a bit. But there's other engine mounts to support this engine. So we'll take those connectors out, and since we're up here, I'm just going to go ahead and take whatever bolts I can out of here in the back cover, just 10mm bolts. Just going to take stuff out what I can, and then we'll go up in the air. Take the tire off. So I got all the bolts out of the back cover, but that bracket is a pain, so I take that 10mm bolt and get that bracket out of there, make it easier on yourself. I also took the 10mm bolts out for these brackets for this wiring. There's one here and then there's one back here, and I took them both out, little 10mm bolts, to make it just easier to move wires out of the way. And just move that bracket and get that out. And watching this video, if you just buy a timing belt kit, and then you will get a nice how to replace your timing belt instruction piece of paper with lots of nice torque specs on there and how to do it. Pretty handy, something to consider. Get all new components to do the job right, and hopefully it'll last a long time for you. I'm going to take the 21mm lug nuts off, or whatever size you happen to have. All nuts and bolts are left to loosen, right to tighten. Jack the vehicle up. Use safety stands. Got some nice solid metal here. Have a pretty good pinch weld on the edge here. So good places to jack up and use safety stands. Once you've broken the lug nuts loose, a turn or two, then you can jack up the vehicle, protect yourself, and take the wheel off the rest of the way. We'll take that off, and then there's probably maybe a shield in here. Yep. And we'll take that off. Alright, I got an extension and a 21mm socket on here. Got the cover off, 3 bolts. 10mm bolts. There's an indentation here for the timing marks, and there's the marks right here. So while I got this bolt on here, I'm going to try and turn it over to get it on top dead center and line up my marks. I do have the rear cover off, so I can try and line up the marks there to get them at least close before we take the crankshaft pulley off. You probably need an impact tool as best, impact gun. Otherwise, do make tools to hold pulleys, so you might want to consider investing in one of those. But I'll be using an impact gun to take that off. Alright, so I turned the engine over by hand clockwise. I highlighted the dimple here. There's an indentation here and an indentation here. I highlighted them in whiteout to make it a little easier to see. My poor eyes. And then down here, there's a white spot on the crankshaft pulley lined up with the pretty close to the long line for the timing mark for top dead center. So I'm pretty happy with that lineup, and we can take the bolt out then and disassemble. Should slide off, hopefully. If there's a little rust on it, you might have to get a couple screwdrivers and try and pry on each side off to get it off. Doing a little jiggling back and forth. You'll see some rust in there. We'll clean it up so we don't have to fight that as much, but that's what you might be fighting, rust buildup. Alright, then we can take the idler pulley off, probably a 14mm. Then take the tensioner, I believe, off as well, because there's one bolt. Oop. Alright, then we'll take this idler pulley off, probably a 14mm, and then the tensioner pulley right behind it. Probably unbolt that as well. Take those off because we need to get to the bolt behind the tensioner pulley. And yeah, get stuff off. And you can see pretty easily take off 10mm bolts for the lower cover. A couple hidden inside here. So we'll take those bolts out. Probably just need a deep 10mm socket and a 3/8 or 1/4 inch ratchet. Should be able to do all that. I'll be using a air ratchet to speed things up, or M3/8 gun as needed, where I can use it. Note the tensioner has a dimple on it that you got to put in a hole so it's in the right spot. This came out with the bolt for me. I couldn't get the bolt out on its own. And the top covers do go over this one, so you need to install this bottom cover first. Long line, top dead center. Here's the marks, unaltered by myself. The white was already there on the pulley, and there's just indentation without any highlight there. So we're looking pretty darn good up here for the timing belt. Pretty happy with that. Alrighty, now we got the covers off. So the nice thing is you got those nice instructions for the timing belt replacement in your kit, but it's a timing belt and a water pump kit, and they don't tell you how to do the water pump. So a little non-help there. I'll take this mount off because it hides the water pump, and it's got 14mm bolts inside some holes here, so we'll probably jack it up a little bit as needed to maybe gain access to them. And they're little ways, so you might need a medium deep socket or a deep socket to do that. I think there's going to be 3 bolts holding that in place, and I might even move the power steering pump to give myself a little more room. Just go through these holes here. And get to the probably 14mm bolts, maybe just 2 of them holding it on, along with this 12mm bolt here. So I might just take this and lay it off to the side. A little wired to pull off of a connector on the back of the power steering pump. So spacious. So you can't get a 14mm deep socket in there. If I jack up the engine, I might be able to get it in. I've got a 14mm semi-deep. I think it might fit in too deep. So the semi-deep would work, and also I jacked up the engine so the deep will work. Also, you can take this mount out of here. Probably 3 14mm bolts. There's one over here, and then there's a nut actually back here. So if you want to take this out and give yourself even more room, you can. So get access to those bolts. So we'll take the bolts out. 2 on the top, probably 1 on the bottom. Now we can get off our water pump. So my instructions actually tell me to take the water pump pulley off like in the 3rd or 4th step. So the instructions I got, the instructions you might get might not be 100% accurate. That's great, isn't it? Alright, so I'm happy with the timing marks up here.
And we learned that you can't use the trim set to give you, as you know, your problems fits wrong. And this is it.
There's the crankshaft pulley mark and notch. So we've got a hydraulic tensioner here, so we can unbolt two 12mm bolts. It's going to kind of spring, boing, it's going to spring out because it's under tension, but that's all right. I'll take the tensioner off because I'm sure we got new ones and a new idler in our kit. So once we take this off, then we can take all these, the belt off. So we've scraped a couple spots. There's some plastic lingering from the old gasket, but take your finger and rub it around. Otherwise, maybe get yourself a plastic scraper of some kind. Just be careful. This is aluminum. Don't want to gouge it. That would be bad. So we'll just put our new gasket on the two dowel pins. We'll put our water pump on and bolt it down. We'll give you some torque specs along the way. The bolts kind of line up too. You got your four black bolts up on the top. 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And you got your silver bolts down here, here, and here. And the 10mm bolt here. So I'm letting you know that it did take me 6 or 7 tries because the gasket kept wanting to fall down, trying to weasel it behind this deal here. Putting the gasket on the dowel pins, it didn't want to stay. You may want to pick up some spray adhesive and spray it on the block and then put the gasket on there and let it sit for a little while before trying to put the water pump on. Again, it took me 6 or 7 tries, but it's on there now. So got a couple bolts started and we'll just finish putting the bolts in. Alright, water pump bolts are 11 to 16 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque spec on that little 10mm bolt on the right, but I'm going to guess maybe 89 to 106 inch-pounds or something like that. Just make sure it's tight so it doesn't fall out. And we're starting to put things back in. Got to torque this down, tighten that down. I'll give you more torque specs. So remember, timing belt kit is very nice, gives you all the torque specs. So here's our auto tensioner, brand new. If you don't get new for some reason, you can collapse this like in a vise. Do it slowly, maybe a half a turn every 15 seconds, but don't rush it. You might explode a seal. So small drill bit or something like that, you can put it in place just like you see. But we have a nice new one, so we're just going to mount this in there and torque it to about 14 to 20 foot-pounds. I think I'm going with 39 foot-pounds for the tensioner pulley and the idler pulley. Alright, got our tensioner bolted in, tensioner pulley, 14 to 20 foot-pounds, or like 34 to 40 foot-pounds. 31 to 40 foot-pounds on the tensioner pulley, and the idler pulley is 36 to 43, so I went in with 40 for both of them. Make things easier for my torque wrench, and make sure this is loose. If it's not loose, you maybe forgot that washer back there, which we talked about, so nice and free. So we'll get ready to install the belt, and there's our marks for the crank. Alright, so we're starting down here at the crankshaft pulley. Get a little screwdriver in there, pry bar, just to help hold that into the teeth. And then we're going to go up around the idler on the right, and then we'll head up to the crankshaft, camshaft pulley in the front, around the water pump, and then to the back camshaft and back down, of course. We want all the slack to be on the tension side, so when we activate it, it'll take up the slack. So we want it to be taut, tighter on the right side, facing the engine. Kind of want to stop here and check our tension. So our tension is a little bit loose, but this mark is not quite lined up. I think it can be rolled to the left a little bit, and that will tighten up our slack. So that's what I'm going to do. Little clip. The marks are pretty close. It's good to have your 17 millimeter wrench nearby to make some minor adjustments. So the belt is on. It was hanging up on there, which it maybe can tend to do. So I pulled it off so I could wrap around the camshaft here. So pretty happy with the marks. So we can then, I believe, pull the pin. Pliers out of there. That out of there. Pull that out. Now we have our auto tension applied. That is installing your timing belt. This is installing your timing belt. It should probably work for your 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010 Kia Optima. 2007 through 2010 Kia Rondo, and 2007, 2008, and 2009 Hyundai Santa Fe, all 2.7 liter engines. Alright, so reverse procedure to reinstall it. It's fairly basic. Put the engine block piece back in there, tighten those suckers down. I don't have torque specs for the rest of it. Timing cover on, idler, pulley, tensioner. Just put it all back together. Pretty easy job, and then we'll go ahead and fill it with coolant over here. Radiator. Ooh. I'm going to pour a nice 50-50 mix of probably green coolant in there, and I'll let you know about how much I add. Then we will start it up and run it, put the temperature on hot inside, and have it blowing out the vents around the floor. And after about 10 minutes, you should start to feel some warmth. If not, go ahead and rev it up to 2,000 RPMs for about a minute or two, and then you should start to feel some warmth. And let it run. So we get about a gallon of 50-50 mix coolant in the radiator, and we top this off a little bit. See the level there? Up and running. So we'll let this run, like I said, about 10 minutes and check for heat. And if we get heat, we'll just let it keep running, go on a test drive for about 10 miles, get it up to operating temperature. And let it cool off for a couple hours and top it off in the radiator and in the overflow as needed. Maybe you do want to check to make sure your cooling fan works down here. Run it until you hear the cooling fan or look at it and see it running. Probably going to come on around 220, 230 degrees. So, you put the top back on when you're all done, happy with it. Don't see any leaks. That's replacing your time belt and water pump. On what, your 2007 Kia? ...2006 Kia Optima 2.7 liter V6.